how you conceive of the word valuable really affects the top two guys. Do we agree? Let's start here. My top two.
Very quickly. Sorry.
Okay,
well, there might be some HMs that pop up. Honorable mentions. I'm saying HMs like I need to abbreviate it. There will be some honorable mentions that pop up on the board, but we're going to do it official ballot style and try not to spoil too much of our all NBA, all rookie, all defense discussion to come. There will be 5. We went 5 deep for MVP and then 3 deep, I think, everywhere else is like the official order, and every other names that appear, the order for the most part might not matter. So if you're watching that felt semi.
Yeah, they're like, for me, it's just like a worth a mention guy. Like, yeah, hey, everyone out there, like, we didn't forget this guy. So my MVP is Jokic, but I think some of the best arguments against Jokic and for SGA, who is my number 2, have like really force you to reckon with like what valuable means, right? So we won't need to get into all the numbers, but like the one that really leapt out to me and made me, want to have this part of the conversation was like, Denver's 22 per 100 better with Jokic on than off, right? That's amazing. Well, a lot of that is because they're just terrible when he's not out there. SGA, the Thunder, like plus 11.7, I think. Again, we're not going to go nuts with numbers, but I'm just using this to illustrate this issue. The Thunder are like 11.7 plus 11.7 per 100 with SGA on. Denver is slightly worse than that. Last I had the numbers pulled up, like plus 10 with Jokic on. So it's like, do we gauge Jokic's value by how good his team is with him on the floor? Because if that's how we're doing it, just by this number, then SGA is more valuable. Or is Jokic more valuable because his team goes to shit when he's not in the game, right? Like, because that's valuable, right? Clearly he matters more to the success / failure of Denver than SGA does for the Thunder, because the Thunder are like almost break even without SGA on the floor. So it's just like, what's valuable to you? I don't know. Like that didn't decide it for me, but I was curious, like you probably came across those numbers too. And just like, how does that affect your view of like, what does valuable mean in that context? Like, do we care that because Jokic's supporting cast, I guess, is worse, or at least his replacement is worse? Like, does that make him more valuable, or should that even factor in?
So I think everything factors in. It's just a matter of how you weight it. And in this instance specifically, the Thunder might be able to tread water without Shea. They still struggle to score like hell when he is not on the court. And it's almost with whatever combinations you futz and fiddle with. Now, what is tough to reconcile, if you look at the percentage of Jokic's minutes that come with basically all starters, it's higher than a lot of the others that are going to be on this list, if not the highest, because that's the way that Michael Malone is going to run his substitutions. At the same time, like Jokic can prop up lineups without Jamal Murray. No problem. If you remove the 2 best players on the Nuggets, which when you get into who's the 3rd best player, let's just use Aaron Gordon is probably at least their 3rd most important player. Like Jokic is still going to float those lineups on his own. And so like he's going to do so better a lot of the times than Shea will do when you mix and match there. So I got a little bit more into the weeds with that, but I also, just as you can't, I'm not going to penalize Shea for having, I don't know if it's a better supporting cast at the top, although like Jalen Williams is doing like wild stuff this year.
And Chet, also, like, wouldn't Chet be the 2nd best player on Denver potentially? Like, I mean, Murray's really great.
No, like, Jamal Murray would still be the 2nd best player, but like Chet can't. Like, the whole thing is that I went with Jokic as well, and I went with Shea at number 2. And I also don't. By the way, I do not think that this is finished. Like this is an MVP award that could still be determined. Jokic to me impacts winning in more ways than Shea, where it's like, yes, Shea's going to have the edge as a scorer. Shea's going to have the edge as a defender because Shea's defense has been incredible this year. He's handled some tough assignments. They do insulate him when he's playing with J-Dub and Lou Dort at the same time. You also have Chet behind you. That helps. But when you look at Jokic, what he does as a passer, and even the ways in which he's able to score at different levels and different types of touches, like where Shea can be a little, not too dependent, but he's dependent on that spacing and those drives, where Jokic can score in a number of different facets. To me, Shea's going to be able to get to the line a little bit more. A lot of that I think has to do with how much that Jokic is going to facilitate the offense from far away from the basket. I also, what turned it for me, and look, the on-off splits are part of that. Jokic's defense has been really good this year. Not to the point where I think Jokic belongs in the Defensive Player of the Year discussion, but for so long, the conversation has been, look at what he does when he comes up to the level, or how high he comes up. He still does that. This year, if you watch them, I talked about this with Ryan Blackburn, he's just he's not a good rim protector. Don't get me wrong, but like he's doing better in drop. And then when we talked about that, Nekias Duncan actually came out with the numbers on what Jokic is doing in drop coverage. And it's like, I can't remember the specific number, but the Nuggets are allowing like under 0.95 points per possession when Jokic is in drop. That's really good. And so you take all of that into account with just like the rebounding, the triple doubles, the way he elevates the play of his teammates. Do you know why I think that Mike Malone is so married to playing his starters together as much as possible? Because he knows the team cannot function without Jokic, and also because he knows that Jokic elevates the play of so many of those guys around him. They found some combinations, Aaron Gordon at the 5 without Jokic, that can work, but nothing that can work for long periods of time. I don't know how to wait. Again, I think there's just other reasons to pick Jokic, as I outlined. If that was the deciding factor, I do find it difficult. I honestly don't know how to view it. And I think Nuggets fans might take exception if you're saying, well, who cares that he plays so much with the starters? It's like, hey, I'm not penalizing him here. I picked him for MVP, but it is part of the discussion, and it might be something that could drive Shai's case in the eyes of voters who, and the final thing I'll say, I'll just be very curious. These are our picks. They're not predictions. I think Jokic should win it. I do wonder if just Shai and the Thunder being so new, and then how people wait. I think with a lot of these awards, what gets baked into it is exceeding expectations. And Jokic we're numb to him. There's like no exceeding expectations, sort of. I'm wondering if that plays into it at all, even though I don't think it should.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think too, like, just to simplify it, this is what, I mean, I think you can get there. If you're just looking at the numbers and you didn't watch a second of tape, it's like a coin flip, because SGA has Jokic in some of the advanced numbers. Although, like you mentioned, Jokic's defense, I think to the extent that like it almost invalidates some of these numbers. Like Jokic is, I think, leading the league in defensive box plus minus last I looked, which is just insane.
That's defensive rebounding is a huge part of that, which is like that's part of the value, but it's clearly over.
Someone is going to cite that and say like Jokic is a great defensive player. Jokic has become like he not damaging and sometimes good defensive player, but just like, this is why we're not just, spreadsheeting and averaging numbers and saying, well, this guy's the best because he's tops in all of these advanced metrics. I just think if you boil it all the way down, I think Jokic exerts a level of control over the game that no one else touches, like on a possession by possession basis. And it is unique in the league. No one else does it. There's a handful of guys ever who have controlled the game the way that he can. And I think ultimately it's just like, you'll never be able to prove this, so it's a perfect argument, or disprove it. If you gave Jokic 4 average NBA players, I think he does more with those guys than SGA does with 4 average players as supporting cast. I just because Jokic can just make anything happen, that whatever needs to happen on the offensive end, he will engineer that. And SGA is awesome, is great. This is another macro point. Because we have a guy second in MVP and we have to make distinctions between him and the guy in first, we are not knocking the guy in second. We're just trying. We're just trying to say, here's the differences as nearly as we can see them. I just think Jokic is just better. I think that's just where we are. I do think it's going to be fascinating. And you brought this up. Are we tired of Jokic? Or by we, I mean the voters. His true shooting is only down to 65%. It was 70% last year. He's been more than this. So what are we going to give him a third MVP? It's like the same stuff that kind of maybe cost him a coin flip award last year. I don't know. This is where it gets interesting though, because those have to be your 1-2. I think if you're being serious at all about this.
I think there's a case so very quickly, I will say when I was parsing this, I don't know that we've ever had an MVP debate at the top with both, where I want both players so badly to just take more threes. They're both under 5 per 100 possessions, and it annoys the shit out of me.
Not since 2012, probably.
Yeah.